Episode 4 of Shogun is here. This is a titular episode that aims to showcase a defining moment in the book, as Blackthorne starts to fully embrace his Japanese surroundings. Yet the way in which the events are portrayed here differ greatly from the source material, in both good and perhaps bad ways. How this episode plays out will likely be very significant for the future of the series. Let us dive in and discuss. I should also note though that due to high demand, I will be getting deeper into spoilers as we go forward. Enough people who watch my reviews either already know the story or real history, so I trust that you understand what you are getting into when it comes to these videos. I apologize if that is not what you are looking for. Either way though, I hope you enjoy. Episode 4 is titled The Eightfold Fence. Now that Toranaga and company have escaped Osaka, we come once again to Anjiro, the small town in Izu where Blackthorne first arrived in Japan. It is also the village that Omi, Yabushige's nephew, rules over. For those of you wondering, Izu is located here. It's a small peninsula within the Tokai region and bordering the Kanto. Thus, geographically it makes sense for Yabu, the lord of Izu, to align himself with the powerful Toranaga, whose own base is close by in Edo. However, it is here that Toranaga leaves everyone behind so that he can return to Edo while Blackthorne stays in Anjiro to train Yabu, Omi, and Toranaga's son, Nagakado, in the ways of Western-style warfare. And although this is generally what happens in the book, there are some major departures from the source material as well. Blackthorne's time in Anjiro is extremely significant, as it serves to build up the real foundation for the accepting of his place in Japan. Blackthorne has been made a Hatamoto now by Toranaga. In a basic sense, he is someone of high rank under Toranaga's banner, and thus he is given Fujiko as a consort and a manor to stay at while living in Anjiro. Blackthorne's experiences in Anjiro really come to shape his own path in Japan, especially with the help of Mariko, who stays with him to help not only translate but also teach him the language. And this is where the first major difference comes in. Blackthorne is given 6 months to train the troops in Anjiro in Western-style warfare. However, on top of that, in the book he is also tasked with learning the Japanese language. If he fails to become fluent during that time, the entire village of Anjiro will be killed. So it's really a threat for him. He has to learn the language in a timely fashion or innocent people will die. This entire aspect is absent from the episode. And I know there is a chance they might introduce it later, but I don't see how it would fit in later. It's important that it happens now for one key reason: Blackthorne's seppuku attempt. This is something that happens both in the book and I think in the 1980 adaptation, where Blackthorne, after having been given the swords by Fujiko, says that if the villagers' lives are on the line, he would rather die himself, and nearly goes through with committing seppuku on his own. This moment where he nearly goes through with it is stopped in the nick of time by Omi, and thus Blackthorne sort of wins the lives of the villagers through his show of conviction. It is such a significant action that earns him the respect of both Omi and Yabu, who come to view Blackthorne much differently going forward. This is also important because in resolving himself to die, only to then come back from the brink, Blackthorne emerges with a whole new outlook on life. This is the real transitional moment, as Blackthorne comes to fully accept and embrace his place in Japan. His mindset is forever altered. This happens nowhere in the episode, and I'm not sure where else they'd be able to fit this moment, because it is extremely important for his development while in Anjiro. Yet this also opens the door to another problem: the amount of time that passes while they are in Anjiro, and how it feels completely rushed. Now, I don't know how much time they're going to spend in Anjiro in the coming episodes, but man, they were flying through things. And to be honest, the one character who I think was hurt the most by this pace besides Blackthorne was Mariko. I just felt like they were all over the place with her character. For instance, 1 minute she's talking about politics, then an earthquake happens and she starts talking about an earthquake, only to then connect the earthquake back to the political discussion from earlier. It just felt so unnatural. And of course, this impacts her growing relationship with Blackthorne. It just didn't feel earned and cheapened a very significant bonding moment she had with him, where she then finally starts to go into her past. They didn't get too deep into Mariko's backstory, but I do imagine it is something we are going to get plenty more into. Once again, Mariko is meant to represent Hosokawa Gracia, who was the daughter of Akechi Mitsuhide. In this story, Mitsuhide is instead known as Akechi Jinsai. He is the figure, of course, who betrayed and assassinated the first of Japan's 3 great unifiers, but was later defeated and plunged his family, including Mariko, into dark times. I just think it's another fumble in establishing her as a likable character, because this scene should have meant so much more if I was more invested in her. She showed glimmers of being a likable character in the previous episode, but for the most part she is still coming off as pretty standoffish. which is ironic given that this is the episode where she explains the Eightfold Fence, and how she can put up a facade while deep down she can be fully somewhere else mentally. It just felt like a bit of a contradiction. However, while I continue to struggle with Mariko, one character who I think they are doing a great job of making us feel for is Fujiko. I continue to love the attention they are giving to Fujiko. She is turning into a fantastic character. I especially love the moment when Blackthorne hands her his guns to keep them safe from Omi, which then results in her aiming them at him. This is straight out of the book. Later, Blackthorne gifts one of the guns to her in thanks, and what is odd is that I felt more chemistry brewing between Blackthorne and Fujiko throughout this episode, despite the fact that I know he ends up getting into a romance with Mariko. How does that manage to happen? How do the showrunners lead me into liking Blackthorne and Fujiko together more than Blackthorne and Mariko? We'll just have to wait and see how they continue to develop these characters. But besides this drama, another core aspect of the episode is Blackthorne training the troops in Anjiro. One immediate key difference in regards to this is Blackthorne's past. If I remember correctly, in the book it is explained that Blackthorne had fought in a land battle at one point, so he does have some knowledge of ground warfare as opposed to naval warfare. However, in this episode, Blackthorne explains he has no knowledge of this, which I think is fair. They can make that change, but they use it as a way to then transition into Blackthorne saying he can better instruct the Japanese on how to properly use cannons. It just felt like an odd way to sort of get around to the issue because I think cannons should have been the main focal point right away. It would also fit well into the fact that, as the show rightly addresses, standard firearms had been in Japan already for quite some time, and the Japanese need no explanation on how to best use them, making the cannons a great alternative that Blackthorne could train them on. Once again, in real history, it is believed that Tokugawa Ieyasu did actually take and use cannons from William Adams' ship, so this makes a lot of sense. And this went down to the cannon training scenes, which I think were all done really well. I should note though that I am not an expert on European weaponry from this time period, so there might be issues with the cannons that I just don't know about. I know there have been problems raised regarding the pistols Blackthorne has as well, as there are ones I think from around 100 years later, so they wouldn't be correct for this time period if I remember correctly. But getting back into it, this training then leads us into the arrival of Nebara Jozen. We met Jozen in the previous episode, as Toranaga was trying to make his escape. If we recall back to that episode and also back to episode 2, we know that Yabu is on the fence about who to support, Toranaga or Ishido. Jozen arrives unexpectedly in Anjiro with the aim of summoning Yabu back to Osaka to renew his pledge of loyalty to the council. However, Yabu does not want to commit to this, never mind the fact that Toranaga's own son Nagakado is there in Anjiro as well. Thus, obviously, Jozen and Nagakado are already at each other's throats, just like we previously saw. Their interactions all play out somewhat similar to how they do in the book, with Nagakado insisting on killing Jozen, yet while Yabu is a bit more on the fence regarding that in the book, it's clear that here in the show he has no interest in doing such a thing. That is, until Nagakado takes the initiative to use the cannons to absolutely blow Jozen and his men into small chunks of meat. This scene was absolutely brutal. I was not expecting it, and it played out obviously different than how it went in the book where they did not actually use the cannons. However, like I said, Yabu was completely distraught over it, compared to his more passive demeanor regarding the situation in the book. But the scene ends with Mariko saying that this means war, which I think is something silly to say and done obviously for dramatic effect. This action alone does not mean war. Jozen was clearly being disrespectful to Nagakado, just like he was in the book. Samurai, when disrespected, tended to feel the need to seek vengeance to slights that are upon them. Thus, Jozen's death is one that can be justified based on his own conduct. This does not mean a massive war between Toranaga and Ishido is going to break out just because Jozen was killed. Sure, it would continue to heighten the tension, but saying that this event alone is going to be the catalyst for the war is just untrue. Unless they're going to take that path with this show, which I hope they don't. Now, there is plenty more we could get into regarding this episode. Things like being unsure about the current state of Omi's portrayal or other odd changes that gloss over significant cultural aspects. But overall, these were my major thoughts regarding episode 4. It does get us from point A to point B for the next episode, and I imagine if you are someone who has not read the book or seen the prior adaptation, you might actually be fine with how it all went. But for me, I'm starting to feel several problems starting to wear this show down. The major issue I feel right now is its pacing. Important things are either just flying by or getting completely left out, and I know they could always emerge later on in future episodes, but there are things I feel are supposed to happen here in order for them to fit in the best possible way. It worries me about the future of the show, because like I said, Blackthorne's time in Anjiro is really the foundation for his real immersion into Japan, and if they rush through it, it might hurt things moving forward. We will just have to wait and see though. I have to remind myself that we are only 4 episodes in and still have 6 to go. For all I know, they could end up spending another episode or 2 in Anjiro and most of my current concerns will get addressed. It's strange doing this week to week because we don't know the end result yet. Obviously, most of us do already know how the story ends, but I'm talking about how they will get us there, what choices these showrunners will make. It will be interesting making my full review at the end, because I'll be able to look back on episodes like this and really see if any of my current complaints were actually warranted or not. But with that said, what do you think of episode 4? Did you like it? Did you have any problems with it? Do you agree or disagree with anything I said here? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell if you enjoyed this video and found it to be most interesting.